I was the first black detective in the department's history. My first undercover operation, believe it or not, was Stokely Carmichael. But I hadn't dedicated myself at that point in time to being a career cop. The guy said, "This is Ken Odell. I'm the president of the local chapter of the Ku Klux Klan."
Hey, it's Lu Pimber, author of the book Breaking Badly, a post-traumatic success story and how entrepreneurship saved my life. I'm sure you get your copy on Amazon and give it a good read. Reviews have been great. People have got some good things to say about it. And I believe I hope and I believe that it's going to affect people's lives positively as they transition into other parts of their life. But today I have a very special guest, very special guest. I have author Mr. Ron Stallworth, okay? Mr. Ron Stallworth is with me here today. You're in Texas, and so I'm going to have Mr. Stallworth introduce himself here in a moment. But before he does, I do want to tell you a little bit about. He's also an author. Wrote the book called The BlacKKKlansman, right here, BlacKKKlansman, and you probably have heard of it because they did a movie about it. They did a movie about it. I watched it not too long ago on one of my flights, and so interesting film. And so, Mr. Stallworth, welcome, sir. Welcome to Lu Pimber Speaks.
My pleasure, Lou. Thank you very much.
How's your day so far? Are you doing good today?
It's a Sunday. Sundays are always boring days for me, so I'm doing
All
good.
right. So Ron, tell me, you're now retired, right?
I've been retired since 2005.
2005, and so you're living back in your original sort of your original home state because I know you're not from Texas, but you're living back in El Paso.
Yeah, El Paso is where I grew up. I'm living here with my bride of 7 years, and believe it or not, we live 2 blocks from the high school that we graduated from.
Oh wow, wow. So tell me, look, Ron, before we get into your story, before we get into this whole KKK thing and everything you got to witness and be a part of, where did it? How did it all start for you? Where are you from originally?
I was born in Chicago in 1953. Uh, my first home in this world was the old Ida B. Wells housing projects.
Okay.
They tore that down years ago, and I lived there for the first 4 years of my life. And then my mother moved to El Paso, Texas, to be with her older sister, who was a military wife, Army wife. And El Paso was my home for the next 15 years.
Got it. So you moved to El Paso at what age?
I was 4.
You're 4. Okay, got it. Got it. And so you were 4. This is in the mid 50s now, right?
Yeah, it would have been 57, I believe.
So I'm sure El Paso has just grown dramatically since those days, I'm sure, right?
It is a different city from the one that I left back in 1972.
And I was in El Paso, I was in Fort Bliss, Texas in 1988 and went back a few years, several years later. Very different. El Paso's grown, right? And Fort Bliss has grown. It's changed quite a bit. So, as a matter of fact, I was there for basic training in 1988. I was probably the last class ever go in that place. That place was so, the area we were in was pretty beat up, as I recall. But we had to pay the price and deal with all the broken down equipment we had back in 1988. So, but you know what? It
Mm-hmm.
builds character. So you're originally from the Chicago area. You moved to El Paso, and then how did you? Where'd you go from there after you graduated from high school? Where'd you end up?
In 1972, a year out of high school, my mother paid a visit to her sister in Colorado Springs.
Hmm.
She was married to a Army cook, sergeant, and my mother came back from a 2-week visit and said, "We're moving to Colorado Springs," just like that. And I said, "What the heck is Colorado Springs? And doesn't it get cold up there?"
Yeah.
And she told me, and she said, yes, it does get cold, it gets snowfall and everything. And she says, we're moving.
And that was it.
And 2 weeks later, well, first I called my aunt in Colorado Springs and I asked her what job opportunities are available. And she told me that the city government is hiring and they have job openings in the police department.
Okay.
I was thinking at that time in my life, I was thinking about a career in law enforcement. And she told me that. She said they have this program, it's called Police Cadet. It's
Okay.
for high school graduates between the ages of 17 and 20 years of age who want to be cops. And you take the same test as regular police officers. The only difference is you're not old enough to carry a gun, and you do civilian support jobs around the department, and they'll put you through the police academy. And once you turn 21, they change your uniform from brown to blue, give you a badge that says patrolman, and you start your field training program at that time. So I took the test. I passed it, fairly high score, and officially became a cadet on September 13th. I'm sorry, November 13th, 1972.
Yeah. So at one point, you write in your book, though, you didn't always want to be a cop, though. You said you wanted to be a PE teacher, right?
At the time I did this, I still wanted to be a PE teacher.
Yeah.
Uh, Being a cop was just a stepping stone to that goal.
I see.
Uh,
I see.
but a
So,
year into it, I was having too much fun, and B, making much more money than I would have been had I not been uh, in the police ranks. Uh,
okay.
that's when jobs were minimum wage was $1.60. I was making $5.25 as a cadet at
Wow.
the age of 19.
Wow. Okay. So you're doing good.
I was doing good.
Yes, sir. So you're a cadet, and then the transition into the police side of things. Now, did you have to go through an interview process?
I was interviewed, and it's depicted in the movie. There were three people on my interview panel. There was the deputy chief of police,
Yeah.
the captain of the Uniform Patrol Division, and the city manager, a black man named James Woods.
Yeah.
Woods was dedicated towards changing the atmosphere within the police department. Um, Colorado Springs PD at that time was lily white. They had no black officers, no black personnel besides me trying for the job. And they were determined, or he was determined, to change that.
Good.
So I might add, the cadet program was originally designed to increase the minority ranks within the department, especially among blacks. It was never a successful program in that regard, but that's why it was originally came into being. And I was the first black hired in the cadet program. I was the first to graduate from the cadet program and move on to patrolman.
Got it. So in your book, you talk about they really grilled you in the interview process because you would be the first black officer in their department. So they were concerned, right? They were concerned how you would deal with some of the racial bias from the community, right? But you referenced Jackie Robinson a lot in that section, right? You talk about Jackie Robinson, how you wanted to deal with it like Jackie Robinson did, be the bigger man.
Uh, they asked me if I knew who Jackie Robinson was.
Okay.
Of course, I knew who Jackie Robinson was.
Yeah.
And they asked me if I could be like Jackie Robinson and not fight back when I was called terms like nigger and so forth. And they said, you're going to be tested.
I have mixed feelings, sir.
Would you call yourself a womanizer?
No, I would not, sir.
You frequent nightclubs?
No, sir.
Do you drink?
Only on special occasions, sir.
Ever done any drugs?
Only those prescribed by my doctor, sir.
Well, that's kind of rare for a young, hip soul brother like you.
Yes, sir. but my father was in the military. And my parents, they raised me the right way.
How do you get along with people generally?
Sir, they treat me right, I treat them right. Like I said before, I was raised up the right way, so
I mean, have you ever had any negative...
What would you do if another cop called you a nigger? Or worse?
Would that happen, sir?
And I told them I've been tested before in El Paso, so that wouldn't be the first time I was called that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can be like Jackie if I have to.
Right on.
And keep in mind, I was 19 years old, and they asked a bunch of questions dealing with race. You just referenced the fact that I was the first black officer. I was not the first black officer. That was a myth created by the Hollywood studios.
I see.
I was the first black cadet. I was the first black cadet to graduate from the program and become a police officer, but I was not the first officer. When I was a cadet, about 4 months into my cadet experience, they hired 4 other black officers.
Okay.
And these guys were in training at the same time I was a cadet.
I see.
So I was, in essence, the 5th black hired to be a cop, but I had to go through the cadet program. I was the first black detective in the department's history,
Got
the
it.
first and the youngest at the age of 22.
So when they asked you those questions at the time, do you feel that they were just kind of get an idea how you'd respond to that type of treatment by the community, and just to see if you were mature enough to deal with that, or were they trying to keep you out?
No, they were trying to find out where my head was at in terms of being the first and the only black in the cadet program, how I would respond to community pressure.
I see. Got it. Okay, that's good. And so you went to the cadet program, and then what happened from there? You completed, how long was that cadet program?
Well, you could be a cadet. The minimum age was 17 with a high school diploma, and the maximum age that they would hire would be 20. So I hired on at the age of 19 and a half and spent roughly a year and a half as a cadet before I was turned 21 and advanced upwards.
Before we get into your police experience, as a cadet, you were out in the community doing your thing. And what was that like for you? Being 19 with some responsibility, what was that like for you?
Well, they had different jobs for cadets. Like I said, we were civilian support personnel. So they had cadets who were working in the Identification and Records Bureau. That's where I started off, and you see that depicted in the movie.
Yeah.
You would research records for investigators, for cops, pull the record for them, and let them copy whatever information they needed, and then they'd give the record back to you, and you'd refile it. You would take fingerprints. They taught us how to do fingerprints, how to classify fingerprints, which would ultimately be sent to the FBI. They had cadets working in the pawn and evidence detail, overseeing that. There was some responsibility that came with the cadet program. They also had you writing parking tickets. I was a meter maid for a good period of time, which I enjoyed because it got me out of the office and into the streets. I learned to interact with the community. Learned to hold my tongue, bite my lip a lot when somebody would say something, and that was fun. Although it was cold, I don't like cold.
So tell me, at which point do you first get the itch to decide, okay, I think I'll become a sworn police officer, and then from there, the itch to work in an undercover capacity? Well, how did that happen?
I was assigned to the Records Bureau, and I noticed these long-haired, hippie-looking guys coming up and asking for records. At first, I thought somebody's playing a practical joke on me,
right?
Because these guys look like the scummiest dirtbags on the street, and they told me, These were the undercover narcotic officers, and whenever you see them in public, do not acknowledge them, don't recognize them. It could be working a case, and literally it could be a life or death situation.
Right.
So this is who they are, and anything that they need, you get for them. So I started seeing them coming up and asking for records all the time, and I struck up a conversation. What do you guys do? How do you operate? What's it like being an undercover cop? Have you ever shot anybody? You know, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And from that, I decided I like the fact that they look the way they do. I don't like uniforms. I've never liked a uniform. I've hated every uniform I've had to wear.
Yeah.
Some guys strive on that. I
Yeah.
didn't. I wanted to be able to mix and mingle with the public, look like the public, and yet have the authority, the power that came with that badge and the gun that they were going to give me. So undercover work was what I naturally gravitated towards.
And how did you make, because you got into undercover work pretty quickly, right? Normally it takes a couple of years, right? So you got into it pretty quickly, and that was because you were kind of persistent about it, or how did that happen?
I was persistent. The sergeant of narcotics at the time, if he's still alive, he's probably in his 90s. He hates my guts, and I hate him equally as much because we had a falling out years ago, and I won't get into why, but I was called a traitor by him, that I didn't support the department when an issue came up and I should have supported him. I went with the sheriff's side of events. We had a task force consisted of the sheriff's department, uh, the police department, and we had two other small police departments at the county. They were part of this task force. And whatever the issue was, and I've forgotten it over the years, I chose to side with the sheriff's sergeant instead of my own people. And I was considered a traitor, and he didn't like it. And a animosity developed between the two of us, and it persisted up until the time I left the department and beyond. To me, it was a case of right and wrong. The police position was wrong. I chose to go with the sheriff's position, which I felt was right, and he never forgave me for that. But every time I saw him, his name was Arthur. Every time I saw him, I would ask him, "Hey, Art, make me a narc." And he would laugh. He said, "Well, in order to be a detective, you have to have at least 2 years in uniform, and you have to go through an interview process." I said, "Okay, make me an narc anyway."
Right.
And he would laugh and brush it off, going about his business. One day, he was talking to the chief of police in the hallway, and I walked by, and I casually said, "Hey, Art, make me a narc." And I kept walking. The chief said, I could hear the chief speaking. He said, "Who is that?" And Dalton said, "That's Ron Stallworth. He's one of the new cadets." Chief said, "He wants to be a narc?" Art said, "Yeah. He bugs me about it every time I see him." The chief said, and I'll never forget this because my ears perked up. The chief said, "Maybe we ought to consider that." And that's when I knew that my proclamation of "make me a narc" was getting to them. And I just had to keep wearing myself out on them.
Yeah.
You see, after I didn't become a narc because I was exceptionally good at undercover work or anything. I became a narc because we had heroin and other drugs running rampant in the Black community of Colorado Springs.
I see.
And no Black on the department wanted to play that role, wanted to go into the community, buy drugs, and arrest other Blacks. Me, I didn't give a shit. I wanted to do the job. I thought it was fascinating, and I thought anyone who's putting that poison out for our young people to get hooked on deserved to be caught.
Let me
So
ask you something. Let me ask you something there, okay? Why do you suppose that the other was these Black officers that they didn't want to go in there and infiltrate? Is that what that was?
they didn't want to. They didn't want to be undercover cops, and B, they thought by doing that, they would be viewed as traitors to the Black community. And quite frankly, I didn't give a damn.
Right.
I did not like the fact that drugs were being put out on the street. It was being put out by Blacks for Blacks. And I didn't like the fact that young people, young Black kids were getting hooked on this stuff. And I wanted to do something about it.
Well,
So
I commend you for that, because I can totally relate to that, by the way. And how did the department deal with that, knowing that there's a loyalty kind of loyal kind of officers who would they arrest him if they caught him on patrol and with possession, or they would let it go, or they would at that point feel obligated?
no, the officers, if they had caught these people dirty, they would have arrested. We had
Okay.
the Black officers we had were good cops,
Okay.
and they would have arrested them. They just did not want to be undercover cops, and they didn't want their primary focus to be infiltrating the Black community.
Yeah. So
Like I
there's
said, I didn't care.
yeah. So there was a bit of a challenge when it came to infiltrating, and then they felt they were betraying trust, because undercover work involves a lot of betrayal of trust. There's some trust that's gained, then there's a betrayal of trust, right? So they didn't want to go through that part with the fellow Black dude.
That's correct. That's correct. They were happy wearing their uniform. As I said, I don't like wearing uniform and never have, never will.
Yeah.
And the fact that I could walk around in my regular clothing, look like the average Joe, and yet I had a badge and a gun on my hip,
Yeah.
that was thrilling to me.
Yeah.
And that I had the full force and power of that badge and gun, and I had the freedom to do things that I normally couldn't do because of the uniform.
So tell me about your very first undercover operation.
My first undercover operation, believe it or not, was Stokely Carmichael, one of the leaders of the Black Panther Party at that time.
Okay.
Stokely was making an appearance at we had two Black nightclubs in Colorado Springs. Stokely was making an appearance in Colorado Springs on behalf of one of these nightclubs. And he was going to be speaking to the community, and they had flyers being passed around town and whatnot. My department, Dalton, the sergeant, came to me and said, "You still want to be an undercover narc?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Stokely Carmichael, you know who that is?" I said, "Of course." He said, "He's coming into town and he's going to speak at this nightclub. We want you to go in the nightclub posing as just a member of the Black community, but your job is to listen to what he's saying and write a report, because from what we understand, he's a very dynamic speaker, and we want to be aware of what he is saying to the public, and that's your job. Do you want to do it?" I said, "Most definitely." So I went undercover into the club. And the first thing, believe it or not, the first thing I asked the sergeant was, "Can I buy a drink, an alcoholic drink?"
Right.
He laughed. He said, "You can buy one." I said, "Okay." And what
What'd
was
you buy?
funny
What'd you
about it,
drink?
I drank a rum and Coke. I don't drink beer. I hate
All
beer
right.
with a passion, and I'm not too big on alcohol, period. But if it's got kind of a sweet taste to it and has those little umbrellas in it, I
It's
like
all
it.
yours. All
It's
right.
all mine.
So what'd you
So
learn at that? What when you went to that Black Panther meeting? What was your role or your mission? Was to just gather intel?
yeah, it wasn't a Black Panther meeting. It was Stokely, former Black Panther Party leader,
I see.
talking to the community.
I see.
And he was a very dynamic speaker. So
Mhm.
dynamic that you see it depicted in the movie where John David Washington, who plays me, gets caught up in the rhetoric and the hype of Stokely. And you see John David saying, right on, brother."
Yeah.
That actually happened. Because I was listening, again, I'm 20 years old. I'm listening, or barely 21, because I was a patrolman at the time. But I'm listening to Stokely's speech. I'm hearing what he's saying, anti-white things he's saying, and it made a lot of sense to me. And I'm thinking to myself, I can't be rooting for this guy, because I would say right on and Black Power when he would exhort the crowds to get involved with him.
Yeah.
And I said, I can't be doing that. I got to stop it. But what he was saying made so much sense to me that I got caught up in the hype. Finally, I stopped reacting that way and just started listening.
Hmm.
So literally a transformation took place on the spot with me, my blackness, my police identity,
Yeah.
everything. It gelled together and I became one in that moment.
Can you explain that further? Because I can see a 20-year-old, 21-year-old, Ron Stallworth in this meeting with a very, eloquent speaker, motivating. And which part made sense to you? And then, and which part did not make sense? And then what is it that happened that made you realize, okay, this is who I am, right?
When he started talking about kill whitey and explaining why blacks should be prepared to kill white people, I said, I understand where you're coming from. Because he framed it in such a way that what has a white person ever done for you? What have they always done against us, towards us? How have we been victimized by them over the years, the centuries, the generations? It made sense to me. But at the same time, I'm a cop. I can't be accepting that type of a logic. And I had to fight against it. So I stopped saying Black Power when he would give the Black Power sign. I
Yeah.
stopped saying that. I stopped cheering him. I just started listening, focusing on his words. And sad to say, his words made a lot of sense to me. I could see where he was coming from, and I could see where others in the Black community were coming from when they were preaching this.
What made you different from those other people that were there, aside from being a cop? What made you different? Was it your upbringing? Was it your mother? What made you different? Because there had to be something in your heart, right? Something in your mind, in your heart that says, I get what he's saying because you've seen the prejudice that occurred in the 60s, right? But this doesn't make sense. What made you different?
Uh, I had a wonderful upbringing with my mother. We struggled to survive. She had 5 kids, no husbands. She married 2 worthless GIs, and they didn't take care of us like they should have. My mother worked minimum wage jobs her entire life. Um, Again, that was back when it was $1.60 an hour.
Yeah.
And with $1.60, she raised 5 kids, provided a roof over our head, and the only other subsistence she got was when she had to go to my father's military command and demand that he pay for the upbringing of his children.
Mm-hmm.
And when my mother died, I found out that he was ordered to give $32 per child, and she had 4 children by him, 1 child by another GI who was also worthless. So all total, my mother got, do the math, 32 by 4.
Yeah.
And add the other 32 from the other child. And that supplemented her income working working as a cook in restaurants, working as a bartender. And that's how we survived. My mother worked very hard for that. Um, so she raised us to do the right thing, to stay out of trouble, do the right thing,
Yeah.
and to help one another, to help other people, especially the less fortunate.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I have always had problems with the success that's come my way with BlacKKKlansman, both book and movie. My mother knew I was working on a book when she passed away in 2008, 2 weeks shy of her 81st birthday. She knew I was working on a book, but she never got to see that book.
Mm.
And she never ever imagined that a movie would be made about her third child.
That's incredible, man.
And I've always wished my mom was around so that I could have showed her all this. I could have taken her to the Hollywood premieres and exposed her to what that life is like because it was totally foreign to her. But my mother had a major influence on me growing up. And I basically I didn't hate white people. I wasn't raised to hate white people. I was raised to stand up for myself. And I remember getting kicked out of school 3 times growing up because a white person or a Hispanic person called me a nigger. And my mother raised us that if somebody calls you that, before the sound of escapes their lips, you better hit them in the mouth and knock them on the ground and kick their ass. That's literally how she explained it. She said, I remember saying, Mom, what if they're bigger than me? She said, I don't care. You better kick his ass. I said, well, how am I going to do that if he's bigger? She said, you find the nearest stick and you find the nearest brick. And you better hit him upside the head with one of them, but you better teach him to respect you. And you will not be referred to by those terms. You are not a nigger. Don't ever let anyone call you that and get away with it. And I remember the 3 times I got kicked out of school, got kicked out 3 days for fighting. First thing and the only thing my mother said when I reported to her that I was out of school for 3 days, first thing she said was, did you whip his ass? I lied twice and said yes.
You did your best.
Huh?
You did your best.
I did my best on 2 occasions, but they got the better of me, but I put up a fight. On the 3rd one, I did kick his ass.
So look, so today, even in today's age, and I'm sure a lot in the 60s as well, there's probably a lot of young men who were very easily influenced, you know, and or like in your case, there was no father in the home, right? And so so you feel that what separated you from those men that were there listening to this Carmichael talk, was it the fact that your mom had set a good like moral compass in your heart, in your mind, right? The way you grew up, or was it the fact that you had found purpose in your life in law enforcement?
No, it was my mother. I was still trying to find purpose in my life, but I hadn't dedicated myself at that point in time to being a career cop. It was just a means to an end. I wanted to go to college. I wanted to earn enough money to put myself through college and become a high school PE teacher.
Still,
And there was no dedication on my part at that point in time.
I see.
Just get a paycheck, pay for college tuition, get that bachelor's degree, and move forward.
Yeah.
My mother's influence, she provided a strong moral compass for me and my siblings. And without her, there's no telling where I would have ended up.
Yeah. So so you wrote the book, your movie was made. We're going to get into some of the details about the movie in a second, but what would you tell your mom now if you were able to talk to her? What would you tell her?
Well, I recently had a space, or I recently was placed in the El Paso Museum of History on an exhibit they had dealing with the black experience in El Paso.
Okay.
They recently had a place in there. They had my picture, and they said author of the #1 New York Times best-selling book, BlacKKKlansman, and on which the Academy Award-winning Spike Lee movie was based. And that's essentially what the caption said.
Yeah.
And every time I walked by that exhibit, I would think of my mom, and I would think how proud she would be knowing that her 3rd born child was in a museum, had an exhibit in a museum, and had written this best-selling book and had an Academy Award. I didn't get the Academy Award myself, but my story won an Academy Award. I was just thinking about how proud she would be and how teary-eyed she would have become knowing that that experience had occurred. And I still think about it.
Wow. Well, look, I'm sure she'd be proud, man. I'm sure she'd be proud. You should be proud. I'm sure you are. Let's get into the BlacKKlansman, man. How did that come about? It was a cold call, from what I recall. It was an ad you saw, and how did that happen?
Very cold call and ad. I was sitting in the intelligence office one of the things we did was we read the local newspaper. We had 3 newspapers. One was Denver-based, and then the other 2 were Colorado Springs-based. And we would read the newspapers every morning just to see what was going on in the community that warranted a possible response from us. And on this particular day, I read a local Colorado Springs newspaper, and it said Ku Klux Klan for information, and then there was a P.O. box. So I figured, what the hell? I wrote a letter to the P.O. box. And in the letter, I said, I hate niggers, pigs, chinks, Jews, and Japs, and anybody else that isn't pure Aryan white like I am. And I want to stop the abuse of the black race by these people. And then I made a cardinal mistake. I had worked undercover for 2 years prior to this.
Okay.
So I knew better. But on this day, I had a brain cramp because I signed my real name, Ron Stallworth, to this letter. They would ask me why I did it. And it turned out for the better because I have a membership card in my wallet.
In your
that says
name.
Ron Stallworth on it. But if I hadn't made that mistake, I wouldn't have that membership card identifying me by my real name. And David Duke was the one that prepared the card, by the way.
Yeah.
I also have a certificate of membership that I received in the name of Ron Stallworth. But I wrote this letter to them, and I forgot about it. About 2 weeks later, I get a phone call on the undercover phone line, which I did put in the letter. And for those not familiar, back in those days, you could not trace an undercover phone line. You had to go through select people within the phone company and get them to do it for you. So it was a fairly secure line. But on this particular day, I wrote my name and attached it to the letter and spaced it out. And about 2 weeks after I mailed the letter, I get a phone call on the undercover phone line.
Yeah, who's this?
Ron Stallworth here.
This is Walter, returning your call. From the organization?
The organization.
That's right. We appreciate your interest. What's your story?
Well, since you asked, I hate niggers. I hate Jews.
Huh?
Spics and mix. Dagos and chinks. But my mouth to God's ears, I really hate those nigger rats. And anyone else, really, that doesn't have pure white Aryan blood running through their veins.
And I pick it up. I say, hello. Voice says, hello, may I speak to Ron Stallworth? I'm thinking, oh, shit. Why is somebody calling me on this phone line? What did I do? And the guy said, this is Ken Odell. I'm the president of the local chapter of the Ku Klux Klan. And I got your letter. You said you had some interesting things to say. Why do you want to join the Klan? Now, that's something that every black man in America has always wanted to hear. Why do we want to join the Klan?
Right.
So
Tell me.
I had to, literally, my investigation was starting on the spot. I had to come up with a reason why I wanted to join the Klan. And I had to stop thinking like a black man.
He got you on the spot.
Got me on the spot. I had to start thinking and acting like a white man.
Okay, tell me the process. That's the part where I'm like, how did what did you say to yourself? You know what I mean? Like, people are gonna ask, how did you talk to this guy over the phone? How did he not distinguish your voice from Chuck's voice? Like, tell me.
Well,
Tell me what you thought.
Up to this point, nobody had ever heard or met Chuck. I knew Chuck, but nobody else had.
Okay.
So I knew that you couldn't distinguish my voice from Chuck's voice. I wasn't worried about that.
Okay.
If you're a good undercover cop, and I like to think that I was a good undercover cop, you can overcome obstacles like that.
Sure.
So what I did was, and also that was another media hype that the studios put out, is that I tried to sound white. I never tried to sound white.
Okay.
For the simple reason, and I'm going to ask you this question. What is the difference between the sound of a white person talking versus the sound of a black person talking? You tell me, what's the difference?
You know, I feel that at times I can tell the difference, right? But there's times when you can't. And I think it's probably the depth of their voice sometimes. But there's people from all walks of life who have different depths of their voice. And I've had people that I talk to on the phone who don't know I'm Hispanic. They just, I don't know, but I am, right? So I guess it's really in it's in the eyes of the listener, in the ear of the listener, I suppose.
Listen to this. This is what the sergeant in the narcotics unit, the one I had the problems with,
Yeah.
this is what he said, and this is what others in the department said to me. We can tell the difference between a white voice on the phone and a black voice because you people like to say shit, fuck, motherfucker, and damn a lot. Okay? That literally was said to
That's
me.
what he said.
And I responded by saying, yeah, I have said shit, damn motherfucker, and fuck you a lot. I said, but
Yeah.
whenever I say it, it's because the person I'm saying it to deserves to be talked to that way.
Right.
I said, I know how to differentiate between proper American English and street vernacular.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was their excuse for why my plan wouldn't work. I would be talking like a quote unquote black man, using language like that. And Chuck, we were still talking about Chuck. Chuck would not be talking that way, and it would give him away for as being a white person.
Yeah.
Now, if that isn't the height of racism, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
But that's what I first ran into. So
Now, would you agree that some people have a little bit more soul in them than others when they talk on the phone?
some people have things that they say, an inflection that comes out where you can tell this is probably, and I'll say probably, not definitely, this is probably someone of a darker persuasion. Yes, I
Yeah.
will agree with part of that.
Yeah.
But
But
to
I've
make a
heard white people
blanket,
talk the same way.
yeah, to make a blanket statement that
Yeah.
is how you tell the difference, I view that as racism.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's how the department was treating it. Was that they would be able to tell because the black person, me, would be saying shit, damn, fuck, motherfucker, and everything, and that's just pure bullshit.
A lot of people
So
say that.
a lot of people say it,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know. So I had to fight that point of contention with them and make them realize just how foolish they were sounding by expressing that idea.
You obviously proved
Uh,
them wrong because you spent time on the phone with David Duke.
I talk to him on a regular basis.
You spent a lot of time with Ken, the other guy, who the local leader of the Ku Klux Klan, right?
Mhm.
And then so tell me, in these KKK guys, what was their whole mission? What was their purpose?
I also spent time on the phone with the Grand Dragon for the state of Colorado, Fred Wilkins, who was a fireman in Lakewood, Colorado.
That's right. He was a
Uh,
Grand Dragon. That's right.
uh-huh. I talked to them regularly on the phone. Ken Odell the most, David Duke would have been second, and then Fred Wilkins would have been third.
Interesting.
Their mission, it was interesting. Their mission was David Duke was planning a visit to Colorado Springs within a couple of months. They wanted to get 100 Klansmen in robes marching down the main street in downtown street, Colorado Springs,
Yeah.
Nevada Avenue, for those familiar with Colorado Springs. And they wanted us in robes, and we would be marching, saluting in honor of David Duke, the Grand Wizard.
I see.
There is an iconic photograph that you can find in the Library of Congress, and it has been reprinted in books about the Klan. And it shows a march of, they estimate it was a march of about 100,000 people in Klan robes marching down Pennsylvania Avenue. And I believe this was during the inauguration of Woodrow Wilson.
Mm.
And some of these people in Klan robes were white Klan's women. And this photograph is iconic because they were in march formation, I believe
Okay.
four or six abreast, they were carrying a banner in the front of the formation, and the banner said, America First.
Okay.
Now, who does that sound like?
America First. It sounds like, well, isn't that what? I know a lot of people say that, but didn't Ronald Reagan first start that?
No.
You saying it sounds like Trump?
It was Trump.
Was it? Okay.
Trump preaches of make America great again.
Yes.
America should be first at everything.
Mhm.
America first. That is a Klan slogan dating back to the 1920s.
And they were there to support Woodrow Wilson. Is that what you said?
I believe it was a march in honor of Woodrow Wilson's inauguration as president.
And Woodrow Wilson was, I believe, was a Democrat, right?
He was a Democrat. He
Yeah.
also was a supporter of the Ku Klux Klan.
Mm. Now, David Duke ran for president once or twice as a Democrat as well, right?
No, he ran for governor as a Democrat, and he got soundly defeated.
Okay.
So when the next election came around, he changed his party affiliation to Republican.
In Louisiana. In Louisiana.
Yeah. Think about that. Why would he
Yeah.
change his party affiliation to Republican?
Because he felt maybe he can win?
It's because the Republican Party was more in tune with what Duke was preaching at the time, and they still are. Except now they have Donald Trump leading them.
Yeah.
And he's very, very out front. He's very blatant about it. In other words, what the Democrats refused to accept and acknowledge, the Republicans were willing to. So he changed his party affiliation to get their support. And he lost again, by the way.
Yeah,
But he got more votes the second time around.
I see. And so as you're meeting with Duke and over the phone, at least, because you never met these guys in person, it was all over the phone, right?
Well, I couldn't meet him in person.
But
God bless
eventually,
him with their beautiful skin.
Eventually, you did meet David Duke in person, but you were Ronald Stallworth, the detective. You were there to protect him from any kind of violence.
Yeah, I got after we got into this thing, the chief, we were getting death threats against David Duke, serious death threats. And the chief called me into his office one morning. David Duke had come down from Denver. He was staying with Fred Wilkins, the Grand Dragon up in the Denver area.
Yeah.
They had driven to Colorado Springs because they had several media conversations that they were going to hold to publicize the Klan and to publicize what their goal was. And the chief called me into his office that morning, and he said, this man is getting some serious death threats. I don't want anything happening to him in my city. We have nobody else available. You're it. He said, I'm assigning you to be his bodyguard. You shadow him wherever he goes and keep him alive until he gets out of my city.
Hi. Mr. Duke. Favor to ask? Nobody's going to believe me when I tell them that I was your personal bodyguard today. Care to take a Polaroid with me?
Now, at that time, though, you had already been speaking to him. You had already received your membership card, right, to the KKK. And in your place was an undercover detective named Chuck, who was playing you, Ron Stallworth, member of the KKK, right? Those things were happening at the same time, parallel.
Somewhat. I had gotten my membership card because you were supposed to get it within 2 weeks of submission. I called David Duke up personally when I didn't get it and said, I'm Ron Stallworth. I'm one of the new members in Colorado Springs.
Yeah.
And I've been told that I can't participate in cross burnings or anything else until I have my membership card. Can you check on that for me? And I could hear the rustling of papers in the background. And David Duke said, oh, here's your application right here. He said, yeah, we've had a snafu in our office. Things are moving slow. He said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll personally process your application and get it in the mail to you. That way you'll have your card. I said, Mr. Duke, everyone called him Mr. Mr. Duke, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And when you come to Colorado Springs, please look me up. He said, I will. I'll be there within a couple of months or so. I said, please look me up. I would love to. And I literally said this disgusting thing. I would love to sit at your knee and learn from you about how to be a good Klansman. He liked to be fawned over, much like Donald Trump does. So at every opportunity, I would say crap like that, and he ate it up. So I told him that. About a week later, my membership card came, and I've carried that membership card in my wallet wherever I go since I got it in January of '78. I'm often asked, why do you carry that card? And this is what I tell people. If I'm ever in a fatal car crash and some officer comes upon my poor mangled black body, he's going to go through my personal effects. He's going to find that membership card. He's going to look at my black body, look at the car, and he's going to freak out when he realizes this doesn't add up. What's going on here? He's going to think he's in the Twilight Zone or something. So I carry my card in part to screw with people's heads, and in part because it's a memento of a unique memento of my career.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard of anyone else of a black cop or anything like that, or even a Hispanic cop infiltrate the KKK in any way. So, I mean, obviously you infiltrated him through an intelligence gathering op, and then you inputted a white cop, Chuck, and you were pretty successful at it. I mean, you guys got quite a bit of information on it. Now, no arrests were made in that investigation, right?
It was an intelligence investigation, not a criminal investigation.
I see.
There is a difference.
Were you able to put together any kind of were you able to put together in your intelligence gathering any evidence to support a criminal investigation?
Yes.
Okay.
We knew that they had military personnel, because most of the Klan members were from Fort Carson. We knew they had military personnel that were trained in ordnance, explosives. They were trained in ordnance, and they wanted to raid the armory at Fort Carson and steal as many weapons as they could in preparation for the quote-unquote big race war that was coming on. Stokely had warned me about the big race war, and the Klan was preaching it at the same time. Stokely had told me, brother, get a gun, because we're going to have to kill Whitey at some point. So get yourself a gun, and let's be prepared to kill Whitey. So the Klan was preaching the same thing, while they were also trying to preach that they had followed Martin Luther King's example, and they were a nonviolent organization. So David Duke was basically taking his Klan group to another level politically. They were preaching violence, using violence to accomplish their objective, and they were telling me some of this stuff. They tried to. We got Chuck in because obviously I couldn't meet with him face to face.
Right.
So we had to figure out a way to get a white officer in there posing as me, so that we would have eyes and ears inside the meetings. Chuck was a good undercover cop, good narcotics cop. I knew him. I helped train him. And if you were listening to Chuck's voice right now, it would be totally different than mine. His voice was different. We were about the same height, maybe about the same weight.
Yeah.
But you would know that you were talking to somebody different than Ron Stallworth. But these guys, they were so focused on me, on Ron Stallworth, on the Ron Stallworth that they had met on the phone, that they were willing to accept whoever showed up saying he was Ron Stallworth. And that's one thing that people who work undercover need to understand. If you wrap your adversary in the cloak of your story, if they believe in your story from the beginning, they will believe it until you prove otherwise, that you're lying.
Mm-hmm.
They believe Ron Stallworth was white. They believe Ron Stallworth was a white supremacist like they were. They believe Ron Stallworth supported their agenda. and nothing was going to convince him otherwise because they had got so caught up in my bullshit.
Yeah, yeah. Now you said you guys spoke very differently. You said, right? His voice
Yes,
didn't sound like yours. Yours didn't sound like him.
right.
But it was your ability to you see, right, Ken, and you see David Duke over the phone that kept Chuck, made Chuck legitimate amongst the group when he was meeting with them in person. And you would brief him about your conversations, right?
That was the key for Chuck and I to pull this off. Whenever I was on the phone, I had to immediately let Chuck know that I had this conversation. This is what we talked about. This is where the conversation led. And when you meet with them again or talk to them again, you have to take it to a different level.
Okay.
But this is the basis of that. In turn, when he was talking to them undercover, I was listening on the recording. We were taping the recordings. I was listening,
Yeah.
and I would talk to him afterwards as well. And I had to be able to go to the next meeting and pick up where Chuck left off. So it was a balancing act between the two of us.
Interesting. I don't think that would fly nowadays. I don't think they would allow anyone to do that in that way. I don't think.
Oh, I've always said that the investigation I pulled off in 1978, I don't think could be done today because technology has changed so much.
Yeah.
Security is so much different. We wouldn't be able to pull that investigation off today.
Yeah. I don't think it would fly. It'd be very difficult. And especially when they assigned you to go protect David Duke with him, knowing there's a parallel investigation going on with another undercover, a Ron Stallworth in the KKK, and then Ron Stallworth detective, I don't think it would fly today either.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree. We happened upon this investigation at a unique point in time
Yeah.
where things just came together, they meshed, and we were able to pull the con off.
Yeah.
But
Interesting.
today would be totally different.
Very difficult to do. Yeah, very difficult to do because there's so much access to information, and there's other options that they could probably do today to achieve that. Now, in your estimation, the KKK and the Black Panthers and all these other groups you talk about, do you think it was just on both sides? Was it just a bunch of good old boys who were just super proud of being white, super proud of being black? And then there was a few of them who had hate for each other?
No, they believed very strongly in their objective and what they wanted to do, what they wanted to accomplish. I've always said that the KKK people were not the brightest light bulbs in the socket because common sense should have told them that this voice that you're hearing on the phone is not the same voice that you're seeing when Chuck shows up on the scene.
They just wanted to believe it. They wanted to believe.
They wanted to believe and they bought
Yeah.
into it, but common sense should have told them otherwise. Also, there are so many loopholes in the story. Sometimes I surprise myself that I bullshitted them the way I did.
Yeah.
For example, they wanted one of their goals was for each member to bring in 3 new members.
Right.
That way, the group would grow exponentially because they were looking for 100 robed Klansmen to march down downtown Nevada Avenue, in honor of David Duke.
Yep.
Well, I never bought 3 members in. I did get Chuck in. I mean, I got Chuck, and then I got a second member, Jimmy. Jimmy worked for the DEA, retired, and now works for the ambassador's office in El Salvador. Jimmy was bought in basically to be Chuck's backup.
Yeah. So
And,
how are these groups, the KKK and the Black Panthers, are they similar in the sense that they're both proud of their race, and they're different in the sense that some of them want violence and others want violence in a different way? How are they different? How are they the same?
I was asked that in a criminal trial once involving Tupac Shakur.
Mm-hmm.
And I was asked, what is the difference between the hate speech that gangster rappers put out versus hate speech like groups like the Klan? And my response was, groups like the Klan, the hate speech that they're putting out is based solely on racial ethnicity. Okay. It has nothing to do with gang violence or whether you're a Crip or Blood or anything like that. It has to do with race, ethnicity. I said, they said, well, what's the difference between Adolf Hitler and what he did? I said, Hitler was about ethnicity. In his case, it was Jews and to a lesser extent, blacks. I said, white supremacists don't like you because they're white, because you're not white, and they want to stop you, want to kill you, whatever, because you're not white.
Do you
So
believe in? Do you believe there's black supremacists as well?
Oh, I know there is. I know there is. Malcolm X, when he first got started, Malcolm X believed that whitey should be killed. The Panthers looked up to Malcolm X when they first got started.
Yeah.
He was their ideological hero. But Malcolm went to did his pilgrimage to Mecca, where you're supposed to go at some point in your life. You're supposed to go and walk around the Kaaba 3 times, the
Right.
holy shrine there,
As a Muslim.
and purify your heart.
Yeah.
Malcolm did his pilgrimage, and Malcolm came away from that, recognizing that there were white Muslims, there were black Muslims, there were brown-skinned Muslims, there were Muslims that had blue eyes and green eyes, and he realized that humanity was one, had nothing to do with race and ethnicity. That is the difference between Malcolm X and a Black Panther Party member versus white supremacists like David Duke.
The thing about white supremacists is that they believe it's the whole Aryan concept, the master race. And
Yes.
the definition of racism, from my understanding, is that you feel your race is superior to all other races, right?
Yes.
Right. And then with that comes a lot of other things.
Yeah, and they don't feel like your race, your inferior race, in this case blacks, should mix and mingle with the superior race, whites, because then you will bring them down. You will be race mixing, you will bring them down to your level, and they don't believe in that.
How do you think, or how do you suppose, as we wrap up here, how do you feel we can get rid of racism? What's one thing we can do?
Get rid of Donald Trump.
Well, you think Donald Trump's a racist?
Donald Trump is a racist. Let's start with that. I had a conversation.
What do you think? Oh, here, let's have okay. But what about Morgan Freeman saying the best way to get rid of racism is just quit talking about it?
That's fine and dandy, provided you can get everyone to stop talking about it.
Right.
But
yeah.
I use David Duke as an example. David Duke is a very likable individual. If you were talking to David Duke right now, I guarantee you would like him.
Yeah, very charismatic, I'm sure.
He has that personality.
Yeah.
You as a parent would want your daughter to date David Duke or someone like him.
But David Duke employ blacks?
No.
Did David Duke employ other minorities?
No.
Okay.
But David Duke cannot have a conversation without the subject of race coming up, and then he launches into his screed about the inferiority of blacks versus the superiority of whites.
Right.
So
when you compare that to Donald Trump, I don't think he's ever had a race conversation where he feels he is superior to anybody. Has he?
Donald Trump preaches, he tries to walk a fine line. Donald Trump preaches against, he refers to blacks as my blacks. Don't call me my black. I'm not anybody's black.
I've never heard him say. I never heard him say that. But
he has said it at some of his campaign events. He will say, "Look at my black over there," just like he says, "My generals."
I would love to hear. I would love to hear what he said about that. But I personally look. I judge a person by who mentored them in their past. I judge a person by how they raise their kids and what their kids are doing today. I judge a person by who they surround themselves with, right? and kind of what their vision is for the future, right? I've never seen Trump as a racist, just so you know. I mean, maybe you have, I don't, but I see a lot of other people who always talk about race, and I'm just like, why are these guys always talking about it, man? Like, look, I've experienced my own fair share of it growing up myself, but you know what? Here's how I looked at it. My mother would say, it's their problem, not yours. If they have a problem with you being Mexican or Hispanic or Mexican origin, it is their problem, not yours. And in law enforcement, just like you treat everybody professionally, you treat everybody the same until they give you a reason to not, And
Let
then,
me let me ask you this, Lou.
yes, sir.
Are you a race? Are you a rapist?
Am I a rapist? No.
Donald Trump says all Mexicans are rapists. He said that
Well,
coming down the elevator escalator.
yeah,
He
yeah. Well,
said,
he did say that they don't send their very best, and I would agree. Some of them aren't their very best.
no, we all could agree on that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that applies to any group applying for American citizenship.
Right, right,
But
right,
when
right.
he categorized all Mexicans as rapists, they're dealing drugs. Not all
Yeah,
Mexicans deal drugs either.
you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
That is racism.
Yeah,
That is racism.
yeah,
We had that Walmart shooter here in El Paso about 4 years or so ago, 5 years ago. And his sole deal was to get rid of the rapist Mexicans and the drug dealing Mexicans to kill
yeah,
them off.
yeah.
Okay,
I would
and
agree. I would agree that there's a more sensitive way to say stuff, more inclusive way to say things. But I don't believe that anyone thinks that every Mexican is a rapist or anything like that. There's plenty of that to go around with everybody.
I would agree. I would agree with that, except Donald Trump thinks that way.
All right.
If you haven't learned, I hate Donald Trump with a passion. I got no
Yeah.
use for him. Uh, to me, he personifies the word scum.
Really. All right. Um, I
Guess
just
what?
I just
Guess where I'm voting.
I don't know who you're voting for because Biden's not going to do much.
He's going to do more like he's done now than Trump did in 4 years.
That's a whole other conversation we should have, my friend. You know, you know, I gotta tell you, man, you've accomplished a lot in your law enforcement career. You retired from law enforcement. You worked at a couple of different places. I think your ability to write this book and they made a movie about you, which is incredible. Is a lot is to commend you for that. You know what I mean? If I think that if you can achieve this, then that opens the doors for a lot of other people to achieve this. You've done quite a bit, my friend.
I encourage anybody who is in the police profession, especially in the unique aspect of the profession of being undercover cops, because that's a challenge. I don't care where you are, who you are, what you are. Being undercover is a challenge in and of itself. And I
Yeah.
encourage all of my brothers in law enforcement to write your story, tell your story. If for no other reason, tell it for your grandchildren,
Right.
your children. Let them know about the trials and tribulations that you had to go through in order to be successful, in order to make life better for them. Some people will get lucky like I did, and it was pure luck. None of this was planned. Some people get lucky and have a Spike Lee or someone like that come and want to make a movie of it. But
Yeah.
we all have a story to tell. I'm reading your book. Your story is very fascinating. I'm glad that you wrote it. I haven't finished it yet, but I will finish it.
Thank you, sir.
Everybody should write it. We both know Jay Dobbins.
Yes. Incredible guy. Love that dude.
That is a story. That is a book waiting for a movie category to come for someone to convert it over. It
Yep.
should be a movie.
Yep.
What he went through to accomplish his objective of working on the Hells Angels, amazing story.
Yeah,
Amazing
for sure.
story.
Always admired
So
him.
I always say, write your story down, but don't expect things miraculously to happen like they
No.
did with me. I was lucky. I came around at the right time and with the right people and had the right story, and it took off from there.
Look, I define luck as this: proper preparation meets timing.
Right.
Right? And here's another thing: I read your whole book. I've heard about all this stuff about you. At no point in the book, in no point in your story, by the way, are you a victim? Do you list yourself as a victim of anything? You saw you had some challenges with people who were prejudiced or racist towards you at times, but at no point do you list yourself as a victim in any way. You came out a victor. You wrote a book. You overcame it. Despite challenges even in the workforce, I'm sure, and you did an investigation that no one's ever done before. You wrote your book, man. A movie was made. At no point can anyone say you're a victim of anything, man. So I think you did a great job.
I don't consider myself a victim, although I have lost friendships dating back 50 years with the Colorado Springs Police Department. I've lost friendships because I've taken stances, positions that they don't agree with, because I was critical of people that I worked with that they don't agree with. Some don't agree with, and I've had officers that I was formerly very close to tell me that I have since gone over to the dark side, that I'm anti-American, and what happened to you is a question I get asked frequently. Nothing happened to me. I have always had the same position. I just was very strong in my conviction to attack certain things, to stand by certain things, and nothing's going to change.
All right. Well, look, you're gonna stand by your convictions. You've done that. You've been good at it. You've been successful at it. You've been a steward of law enforcement, of the work in law enforcement. I appreciate that. I thank you for that. Okay. Any last piece of advice for cops that are out there today?
Don't let anybody ever tell you you can't do something. And if they do tell you, push back against it. I don't care what rank the person is, who they are, what their status is. If you believe in yourself, push back and stand up for yourself. Because if I had listened to all the naysayers attacking me in the beginning, this investigation would never have happened.
I love it, man. Look, you guys heard here with Mr. Ron Stallworth. I read his book, took some notes. And Ron, I appreciate your time, sir. Everyone needs to read this book. It says soon to be a major motion picture. Well, guess what? It became a motion picture. Congratulations to you, Ron. I appreciate you. I'm going to meet you sometime soon, I'm sure, on my next trip through El Paso. Stop by and say hi to you. And we'll talk Trump. See you later.
We'll talk Trump, and I'll buy you dinner.
All right, my friend. Text soon. God bless you. Yes, sir. Bye-bye.
Take care, Lou.
Yes, sir.
Bye-bye.